He only wanted peace on his ranch, but when a trespasser's threats turned into violence, one father was forced to make the hardest choice of his life to protect his family. He had always dreamed of living far away from the constant noise of the city. For years, he worked long hours surrounded by traffic, endless meetings, and the feeling that he was trapped in a world that didn't belong to him. When he finally saved enough money, he bought a ranch on the edge of a quiet rural town. The place stretched far in every direction, with open fields, tall fences, and the soft sound of the wind moving through the trees. For him, it was more than just a property. It was freedom, a chance to live by his own rules, and most importantly, a safe place for his wife and children. The ranch quickly became their sanctuary. Every morning, the man woke up before sunrise. He would step out onto the porch with a cup of coffee in his hand and watch as the first light painted the sky in soft orange and pink shades. His children would soon wake up, sometimes running barefoot through the grass, chasing each other while their laughter echoed across the land. His wife tended to the small vegetable garden, checking the tomatoes and cucumbers, making sure the soil stayed moist. These were simple moments, but they meant more to him than anything money could buy. He had moved away from the city because of the constant interference from people who thought they had the right to control how others lived. Back in the neighborhood, where he once lived, every little thing was a problem for the Homeowners Association. If his grass grew too tall, they sent a warning. If he parked his truck in the driveway for too long, they fined him. Even when he built a small shed in his backyard, they claimed it didn't fit the community look and forced him to remove it. He grew tired of living under such rules that seemed designed to take away freedom. That was the moment. He promised himself he would find a place where nobody could tell him what to do. When he bought the ranch, he felt like he was finally breathing fresh air for the first time in years. There were no neighbors watching him, no one writing him angry letters, and no board of people pretending to know what was best for his family. On his ranch, he made the choices. If he wanted to raise chickens, he could. If he wanted to put up a fence that didn't match anyone else's, nobody could stop him. He was free, and his family was safe. Life on the ranch was not always easy, but it was honest. He worked from dawn until evening, mending fences, feeding animals, and making sure the land stayed productive. His children often helped, carrying small buckets of water or gathering eggs from the chicken coop. They weren't afraid of hard work. In fact, they enjoyed being part of something real. His wife cooked meals from the food they grew, filling the house with warm smells that made every day feel like a holiday. At night, the family would sit together on the porch, looking at the stars. The sky above the ranch was so clear that you could see countless stars shining, something they had never experienced in the city. Where bright lights drowned out the night, the peace of the land gave him a sense of pride. He wasn't just living, he was building a legacy. His children were learning to appreciate the value of nature, hard work, and independence. The family dog roamed freely, guarding the property while also being a playful companion for the children. The ranch was alive, not just with crops and animals, but with love, laughter, and a sense of belonging. He remembered one particular day that made him realize he had made the right choice. It was a warm summer afternoon. He had just finished repairing part of the barn roof when his youngest daughter came running to him, her hands full of wildflowers she had picked from the field. She smiled and told him she wanted to decorate the kitchen table with them. Later that evening, as they ate dinner with the flowers in a glass jar at the center of the table, he felt a wave of happiness. It was in those small, pure moments that he understood what peace truly meant. But deep inside, he also carried a quiet determination. He knew how hard he had worked to give his family this life. He had fought against people who tried to control him before, and he was ready to defend this freedom with everything he had. He didn't talk about it often, but his wife knew. She could see it in the way he double-checked the locks at night, the way he carefully walked the fence line, making sure everything was secure. He loved the land, but more than that, he loved the people on it. They were his reason for every decision, every sacrifice, and every long day under the hot sun. Even though life seemed calm, he never forgot how easily peace could be disturbed. That was why he cherished every moment of laughter, every shared meal, and every quiet evening on the porch. He wanted those memories to last forever. The ranch wasn't just his dream. It was his shield against the world outside. And as long as he was there, nothing would take that peace away from his family. Life on the ranch had been peaceful for a long time. Days passed slowly, filled with work and laughter, and the family felt safe. But peace often attracts the wrong kind of attention, and for this man, trouble came in the shape of a homeowners association from a nearby neighborhood. His ranch was not part of the association, but that did not stop one of its members from trying to interfere in his life. It started with small things. One morning, while the man was fixing a broken fence post, he noticed a stranger parked near the entrance of his property. The man stayed inside his car, staring for a while, and then drove away. At first he thought it was nothing, maybe someone lost or curious. But then the visits became more frequent. Soon, that same man walked up to the ranch gate one afternoon, introduced himself as a member of the HOA from the neighboring community, and began talking about rules that were supposed to be followed in the area. The ranch owner listened politely at first, but confusion quickly turned to irritation. His ranch was private land, bought with his hard-earned money, and it was not tied to any association. Still, the HOA member spoke as if he had authority, pointing out how the fence was too tall and how certain animals should not be kept so close to the property line. The ranch owner calmly told him that the land was his and not under HOA control. The man gave a stiff smile, but his eyes carried a sharpness that felt like a warning. Over the next weeks, letters began arriving in the mailbox. They carried the HOA's letterhead, stamped with official-looking seals, and inside were lists of supposed violations. The barn roof needed painting. The livestock should be reduced. Certain equipment should not be visible from the road. Each letter demanded compliance within a set time, threatening further action if ignored. The ranch owner crumpled each letter and tossed it aside. He had no obligation to follow those demands, and he was determined to make that clear. One evening, while the family ate dinner, the HOA member showed up at the gate again. This time his voice carried less politeness. He leaned on the fence, pointing at the fields, saying that the ranch brought down the appearance of the surrounding area. He complained about the sounds of the animals and hinted that complaints from neighbors were piling up. The ranch owner stood firm. He explained again, slowly and clearly, that his land was outside the HOA's control, told the man to stop coming uninvited and to leave his family alone. The HOA member smirked, muttered something under his breath, and walked away. From that point forward, tension hung in the air. The ranch owner noticed the man more often, driving by slowly in his car, parking near the edge of the road, sometimes snapping photos with his phone. The children grew nervous when they saw him. His wife asked if they should be worried, but the man reassured her. Still, he could not ignore the unease growing inside him. This was no longer just about a pushy neighbor. It felt like the start of something more serious. The HOA member's behavior escalated. He began showing up during the day when the ranch owner was working in the fields. He shouted across the fence, demanding changes, threatening legal action, and claiming he would bring in lawyers to force compliance. The ranch owner reminded him again and again that no court would recognize HOA power over private land outside its boundaries. But reason meant nothing to the man. His tone grew harsher, his words sharper. One afternoon, as the sun beat down on the land, the HOA member crossed the property line without permission. He walked boldly up the dirt path toward the barn, snapping pictures with his phone and scribbling notes. The ranch owner intercepted him halfway, his voice steady, but his anger clear. He told him to leave immediately, the man argued, claiming he had authority to inspect the property. The ranch owner stepped closer, pointing to the gate, and made it clear that if he ever stepped foot on the ranch again, it would be considered trespassing. The HOA member glared at him, his jaw tight, before finally turning around and leaving. That night, sitting with his wife on the porch, the ranch owner admitted his worry. He had dealt with difficult people before, but this felt different. This man seemed obsessed, almost fixated on the ranch. It was as if he could not accept being told no. His wife squeezed his hand and reminded him that they were strong together. But in her eyes, he saw the same concern he felt inside. The situation did not calm down. Instead, the letters kept coming, thicker and bolder, filled with more threats. The HOA member began calling, leaving long voicemails about fines, lawsuits, and consequences. Sometimes his words carried a mocking tone. Other times they were sharp, with anger. The ranch owner stopped answering the phone, but the tension weighed on him. Each time he looked out at the open land, he wondered when the man would appear again. Despite the pressure, he refused to give in. The ranch was his dream, his family's safe place, and he would not allow anyone to take that away. He worked harder than ever, building stronger fences, reinforcing gates, and keeping a close watch on everything. His children still played in the fields, but now he kept a protective eye on them. His wife still tended the garden, but now she glanced toward the road more often, uneasy whenever a car slowed down near their property. The HOA member became more aggressive in his confrontations. Once he leaned over the gate and shouted insults, calling the ranch owner stubborn and foolish, warning him that things would get worse if he didn't listen. The ranch owner stood silently, his fists clenched at his sides, refusing to be baited into a fight. Deep inside, though, he felt the storm building. He knew this conflict was far from over, and he sensed that the man would not stop until something forced him to. Still, through it all, he reminded himself why he had chosen this life. He had left behind the city, the rules, and the constant control of people like this. He had bought the ranch to live free, to raise his children without fear, to let them grow up knowing what independence felt like. No piece of paper, no angry man from a nearby neighborhood could change the truth. This was his land, his family's home, and he would do whatever it took to protect it. The days that followed were heavier than before. The ranch still looked peaceful from the outside, the fields stretching wide and the sun shining warmly, but inside the family felt something different. The children no longer played freely near the road, and his wife often stayed close to the house, glancing toward the fences whenever she heard the sound of a car. The man himself worked with the same strength as always, but his mind was restless. He felt as though every movement outside was being watched, every step across his land noticed. The HOA member's presence became impossible to ignore. At first, he used to linger near the road, but now he came closer. He walked along the edge of the property, sometimes stopping to take pictures, sometimes standing there as if daring the ranch owner to say something. His eyes carried a kind of challenge, the kind of look that said he was not going to back down. The ranch owner warned him again and again, shouting across the field to leave and stay away. But the man only laughed, as if the warnings meant nothing. The family's fear grew when the trespassing turned into something darker. One afternoon, the children were feeding the chickens when the HOA member appeared at the fence line. He shouted that the animals were filthy and that the smell would bring health trouble to the neighborhood. His words were loud, filled with anger, and the children froze in fear. The ranch owner rushed over, his voice like thunder, telling the man to go before things got worse. The HOA member smirked and walked away slowly, but the damage was already done. That night, his children cried quietly, afraid that the angry man might return. It didn't stop there. Soon the HOA member began leaving threats. A note was found tucked under the ranch gate, written in bold letters, "This land doesn't belong to you forever. Fix it, or you'll pay the price." Another time, the ranch owner found the barn door pushed open when he knew he had locked it tight. Nothing was stolen, but tools were moved around as if someone wanted to show they had been there. His wife grew uneasy, whispering at night that they should consider calling the police again. He agreed, and he did file a report, but the officers seemed unconcerned. They wrote it down, promised to look into it, but nothing changed. The HOA member grew bolder. Sometimes he shouted threats directly at the family, standing just outside the property line, waving his arms and yelling that he would make sure they were thrown out. Other times he walked closer to the livestock, pointing at the animals and saying they would be taken away. The ranch owner's patience was wearing thin, but he forced himself to stay calm. He didn't want his children to see him lose control. He wanted them to believe their home was strong, even when the danger outside kept growing. The nights became the hardest. The ranch, once a place of peace under the stars, now felt heavy with silence. Every sound of wind rustling the trees or an animal shifting in the barn made the family alert. The ranch owner often stayed awake late, sitting near the window with the lights off, watching for movement outside. His wife would beg him to come to bed, but he would only shake his head. He couldn't sleep knowing that the man might return. At any moment, one evening, while walking the fence line, he saw footprints in the dirt leading onto his land. The prints were fresh, the soil still soft where the heel had pressed. His chest tightened as he followed the trail. It led toward the barn, then back to the gate. Whoever it was had been inside his property again, close enough to reach the animals or even approach the house. He tightened his grip on the flashlight and swore quietly under his breath. Whoever had done it wanted him to know they had been there. His wife noticed the change in him. He spoke less at the dinner table, his eyes often drifting toward the windows or the door. When the children laughed, he forced a smile, but inside he was boiling. He could not understand why this one man was so obsessed with them, so determined to break into their lives. Wanted to believe that people were reasonable. But every new threat showed him this man was not going to stop. Another confrontation came on a bright afternoon. The ranch owner was fixing a section of the fence when the HOA members stormed up to the gate. His voice was filled with anger as he accused the ranch owner of ignoring legal orders. He said the livestock would be removed, the property would be taken, and the family would regret not following the HOA rules. The ranch owner dropped his tools, walked over, and stood firm just a few feet away. He told him, slow and steady, that the land was private, that he was trespassing, that if he crossed the line again there would be consequences. For a moment the two men stared at each other, the tension thick in the hot air. The HOA member spat on the ground, cursed under his breath, and walked away. But the threats didn't end. Later that week, the ranch owner woke up to find the words "you can't stay" sprayed in paint on the outside of his barn. His wife gasped when she saw it, and the children clung to her, scared. It was no longer just harassment, it was war. The ranch owner reported it again, but the officers only shook their heads. Without proof of who had done it, they couldn't act. He felt anger rising in his chest. Proof or no proof, he knew who had done it. The fear in his family's eyes cut him deeper than any insult could. His children no longer played freely in the fields. They stayed close to the porch, afraid to wander. His wife jumped at small noises, her face pale each time she thought she heard footsteps outside. The ranch owner carried the weight of their safety on his shoulders. He knew that if the police wouldn't protect them, he would have to. The air on the ranch was no longer light and free. It carried a heaviness, a shadow that followed them everywhere. The man worked with the same strength, but now every hammer strike, every shovel of dirt, every trip to the barn carried a deeper purpose. He was preparing, watching, waiting. He felt like a soldier on his own land, defending his family from an enemy who refused to leave them alone. Each day the trespasses grew bolder, the threats sharper. He knew the confrontation was heading toward something dangerous. He didn't want violence. He didn't want blood. But in his heart, he understood a truth that kept him awake at night. If the man came again with harm in his eyes, he would have no choice but to defend what mattered most, his family and his home. The night of the incident began like any other evening on the ranch. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving behind streaks of red and purple across the wide-open sky. The family had finished dinner together, and the children were getting ready for bed. The house smelled faintly of wood smoke from the fireplace, and the soft sound of crickets filled the air outside. For a few moments, everything felt calm. The ranch owner sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, letting the quiet of the night wash over him. But deep inside, he couldn't shake the tension that had been building for weeks. His eyes moved across the dark fields, alert to every shadow, every sound of rustling leaves. His wife came outside and sat beside him. She placed her hand gently on his arm and asked him to come in, to try to get some rest. He nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on the fence line. Something inside him told him the night wasn't going to stay peaceful. The threats, the trespassing, the spray-painted messages, it all felt like it was leading to something worse. No, no, no. He felt it closer than ever. Hours later, after the children had fallen asleep, the quiet night suddenly changed. The family, dog, usually calm, began barking fiercely, its deep growls echoing across the yard. The ranch owner froze for a moment, then stood quickly, his heart pounding. Knew the dog didn't bark without reason. His wife stepped out of the bedroom, her face pale with worry, asking what was happening. He told her to stay inside with the children and lock the doors. He reached for the rifle he kept by the door. The same rifle he had cleaned and maintained. Many times, not because he wanted to use it, but because he had always known he might have to. With the weapon in his hands, he stepped outside into the cool night air. The dog's barking grew louder, sharper, coming from near the barn. His boots crunched against the gravel as he walked carefully, his eyes scanning the shadows. The moon cast a pale light over the land, enough to make out shapes, but not enough to bring comfort. Then he saw him. The HOA member stood near the barn, a dark figure against the lighter wood. His posture was aggressive, his hands clenched. In one hand, the faint glint of metal caught the moonlight. He was armed. The ranch owner's stomach tightened, and his grip on the rifle hardened. His worst fear had come true. The man wasn't just shouting threats anymore. He'd come on too. The property in the dead of night with a weapon. The ranch owner raised his voice, steady but firm, telling him to stop and leave immediately. His words cut through the night air, sharp and commanding, but the trespasser didn't move back. Instead, he shouted, his voice wild and filled with anger. He cursed, saying that the family didn't belong here, that he would make sure they were gone by force. Each word dripped with rage, and the ranch owner's heart beat faster, but his mind stayed clear. Shouted again, warning him that he was armed and would defend his family. The trespasser laughed, a chilling sound that echoed across the land. He began walking forward, slowly, but with intent, ignoring the warnings. His weapon glinted again in the moonlight, and the dog barked. Even louder, sensing the danger, the ranch owner backed up a step, his body tense, his finger near the trigger. His wife peeked through the window of the house, clutching the children close to her, her face pale with fear. He could feel their eyes on him, their lives depending on what he did next. The trespasser raised his arm, pointing his weapon forward. In that instant, time seemed to slow. The ranch owner's mind flooded with images, his children laughing in the fields, his wife tending to the garden, the long days of work under the sun, the nights under the stars. Everything he had built, everything he had promised to protect, was now under direct threat. He shouted one last warning, his voice breaking from the weight of it, but the man kept coming. The decision was no longer a choice, it was survival. With a deep breath and steady aim, the ranch owner squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked through. The night, louder than thunder, echoing across the fields. The trespasser stumbled, his weapon falling from his hand as he collapsed to the ground. For a moment, silence returned, broken only by the sharp barking of the dog and the heavy breathing of the ranch owner. He stood frozen, staring at the man lying still in the dirt. His hands trembled as the weight of what had just happened sank. His wife rushed out of the house, her face filled with fear and shock, the children crying behind her. She clutched his arm, asking if he was all right, her voice shaking. He nodded slowly, unable to find words. He had protected them, but the reality of taking a life struck him hard. With shaking hands, he pulled his phone from his pocket and called the police. His voice was calm but heavy as he explained what had happened. He gave his name, his address, and told them a man had trespassed with a weapon, and that he had fired in defense of his family. The operator's voice was steady, telling him to stay on the line until officers arrived. Minutes later, the sound of sirens cut through the night air. Red and blue lights flashed across the ranch as police cars pulled up. Officers stepped out quickly, weapons drawn, ordering him to put down his rifle. He complied immediately, setting it on the ground and raising his hands. He explained everything, his voice low but clear, while his wife stood beside him, holding their children close. The officers moved toward the trespasser, checking his body, confirming what the ranch owner already knew. One of them looked back at him and gave a slow nod, a look that carried both understanding and heaviness. They asked him to recount the story, and he told them everything: the weeks of threats, the trespassing, the night confrontation, and how he had no choice but to defend his family. His neighbors soon arrived too, woken by the sirens. Some of them spoke quietly to the police, confirming that the HOA member had been a constant problem, that they had heard his threats before. Their words painted a picture that matched his story. As the night dragged on, the ranch felt colder than it ever had. Flashing lights, the voices of officers, the whispers of neighbors, it all blurred together. But through it all, one thought repeated in his mind. He had done what he had to do. He hadn't wanted violence, hadn't wanted bloodshed, but when the man crossed the line with a weapon and a threat, there had been no other choice. By the time the officers finally left, the sky was beginning to pale with the first light of dawn. The ranch owner sat on the porch again, his wife beside him, their children asleep inside. The rifle was gone, taken by the police as evidence, and the yard was quiet once more. But the weight in his chest remained. He stared out across the fields, the same fields he had once seen as pure freedom. And he wondered how long it would take before peace returned. He knew one thing for certain: his family was alive, safe inside their home. And if faced with the same situation again, he would make the same choice. Because nothing mattered more than protecting the people he loved. The days after the shooting felt unreal. The ranch that once echoed with children's laughter and the calm sounds of nature now carried a heavy silence. The man sat on the porch many times, staring at the fields, replaying the night in his head, over and over again. He remembered the way the trespasser's face looked under the moonlight, the glint of the weapon in his hand, and the final moment when he pulled the trigger. He knew he had saved his family, yet the weight of taking a life pressed on his chest like a stone. His wife stayed close to him, her presence steady, but her eyes full of worry. She tried to comfort him, reminding him again and again that he had no choice, that he had acted only to protect them.
Ow.
Her words were kind, but he could see the fear behind them. She too had been shaken deeply. Every time she tucked the children into bed, she checked the locks twice, sometimes 3 times, before she could rest. The children asked questions he didn't know how to answer. They wanted to know if the bad man would come back, if someone else would try to hurt them, and if their father would have to use his rifle again. He held them close and told them they were safe. But his heart ached, knowing that their innocence had been touched by violence. The police came back several times in the following days. Investigators walked the land, took photos, measured footprints, and asked the same questions repeatedly. Each time he explained again how the trespasser had threatened his family, how he had shouted warnings, and how the man had advanced with a weapon. The truth did not change, but the process wore him down. At night, when the ranch was quiet, he lay awake wondering if the authorities truly believed him, or if some small mistake in his words might turn everything against him. Neighbors began to talk too. Some came by to offer support, bringing food or simply standing on the porch to say they understood. They had seen the HOA member's anger before, had heard his shouting, and knew of his harassment. Their words were comforting, yet whispers still spread in the small town. Some people questioned whether he had acted too quickly, whether he could have found another way. He tried not to listen, but in a community where everyone knew each other, silence was hard to find. The children avoided the barn for weeks. The memory of seeing flashing lights and police officers near it haunted them. Instead, they stayed close to the house, never wandering far without their father by their side. His wife tried to bring back normal routines, planting vegetables in the garden, baking bread, and encouraging laughter around the dinner table. But the shadow of that night always seemed to linger. Even when the stars shone brightly above, the ranch felt darker, as if some of its peace had been stolen forever. After a long investigation, the authorities reached their conclusion. The shooting was declared self-defense. Evidence was clear. The trespasser had been armed. He had ignored warnings, and his threats were undeniable. When the news finally came, the ranch owner felt a wave of relief, but it was mixed with sorrow. He had been cleared legally, but his heart was far from light. He did not see the verdict as a victory, saw it as confirmation of something he already knew, that he had done what he had to, but at a cost he would carry for the rest of his life. The night after the ruling, he sat outside alone, staring at the horizon as the sun disappeared. He thought about the man who had lost his life, a man who had chosen anger and obsession over peace. He wondered what had driven him to such hatred, why he couldn't have left the family alone. No answer came, only silence and the cool evening breeze. The ranch owner sighed deeply, his chest heavy with the knowledge that while he had protected his family, another man's story had ended because of it. Still, he reminded himself of what truly mattered. His children slept safely in their beds. His wife, though shaken, still smiled at him with love. The ranch was still standing, the animals still grazed in the fields, and the stars still filled the night sky. The land had been defended, not just with a rifle, with the strength of a father's promise to keep his family safe. Slowly, life began to return to something close to normal. The children laughed again, running through the grass with the dog chasing behind them. His wife hummed as she worked in the garden, planting new seeds for the coming season. The man himself worked harder than ever, repairing fences, fixing the barn, and ensuring the land remained strong. But even in those moments of normalcy, his eyes often drifted to the gate, half expecting to see a shadow there. The fear did not leave completely, but it softened with time, placed by a stronger resolve to protect the peace they had built. One evening, sitting with his family on the porch, his youngest daughter asked him why the bad man hated them. The question cut deep, but he answered as simply as he could. He told her that sometimes people let anger control them, and they forget what is right. He told her that their family had done nothing wrong, that they had only wanted to live in peace, and that no one had the right to take that away. She nodded slowly, her small hand gripping his, and he promised her that he would always keep her safe. The ranch became more than just land after that. It became a symbol of survival, a reminder of how fragile peace could be and how fiercely it had to be defended. The man carried the memory of that night in his heart, not as a story of violence, but as proof of his duty fulfilled. He did not glorify what happened, nor did he hide from it. He accepted it as part of his life, a scar on his soul that came from protecting the people he loved most. Sometimes, when he walked the fields alone, he looked up at the sky and thought about the weight of choices. He never wanted to hurt anyone, never wanted to fire his rifle, but when the moment came, he had stood firm. That truth gave him strength. It reminded him that love for his family was stronger than fear, stronger than threats, and stronger than any man who tried to take it away. In the end, the ranch lived on, carrying both the beauty of peace and the memory of struggle. The laughter of children returned, the crops grew, and the nights once again filled with stars. The man knew he could never forget that night, but he also knew he would never regret protecting his family. For him, that was the truest measure of a man's life, not what he built, not what he owned, but how far he would go to keep his loved ones safe.